Hi there. We're going to be looking at 6 single-purpose WordPress security plugins for your websites in just a second. But before we do, let's have a look at InstaWP. InstaWP is the perfect solution if you need to spin up a disposable WordPress website in the blink of an eye. There's really nothing like it. You can get started today for free at instawp.io. Let's have a look at single-purpose security plugins for your clients' sites. Hello there, my name is Bud Kraus for InstaWP, and I'm going to show you 6 plugins that you could use to help harden your clients' sites. The first 3 we're going to look at are right over here. Now, limit logon attempts and WP Hide Login are very well known and very effective, and we'll also have a look at two-factor authentication. Now these 3 over here, File Changes Monitor, helps let you know if there have been any changes in the files of your WP install. WP Activity Log, very well known and very useful. And also WP Location Block. Now there are some pros to using single-purpose plugins. One is that it just addresses a single issue. So if everything else is locked down in your site, but maybe one thing you need some help on, well, that's when you want to use a plugin like I'm about to show. They're also very easy to configure, so I like that. And if you have a do-it-yourself approach to security, well, single-purpose security plugins might be just what you need. Well, the cons are more plugin maintenance, such as updating plugins. There'll be more of them. And this also could lead to plugin conflicts, so you got to be careful about that. Now, before I begin my demonstrations, a couple of words. One, never use 2 plugins that do the same thing. Well, that doesn't make any sense if you did. Also, you'll see that security and ease of access are trade-offs. I'll show you a little bit more about that when we get into two-factor authentication. And lastly, always the question, should you use a free or a premium plugin? This might be determined by your agency's policy towards free or premium plugins. But one thing that's great about free, of course, is that you get to try something out to see if that is what you want before you ever have to pay for anything. So if you're ready, let's have a look at these 6 single-purpose security plugins that you can use for your client sites. What you are looking at is one of WordPress's most vulnerable screens, and that is, of course, the login page. In a brute force attack, people, or bots, try an endless series of usernames and passwords to break into your site. And of course, once they do that, your site is totally compromised. So what can you do to protect yourself against brute force attacks? Well, by default, WordPress does not do much, if anything. That is, somebody can try to log in as many times as possible. And so I prefer to use the plugin called Limit Logon Attempts Reloaded. It used to just be called Limit Logon Attempts. It's very solid, it's been around forever, and it's very easy to configure. Let's have a look. So here's the main settings page, and there's not really much to do, which is one of the reasons why I like this plugin. Now you have a choice to show a GDPR notice that this plugin is compliant. You don't have to, and of course I've deselected it over here. Here's a very important element, that is, I will receive, after 3 lockouts, a notice of the IP address that's trying to break into my site. And I can scroll down here, because right over here, these settings are the most important. In fact, the first 2 are really the most important. So I will allow a user 4 attempts before I lock them out. And then they'll be locked out for 20 minutes. And then they'll get another 4 attempts, and then they'll be locked out for 24 hours. And you can change this to anything that you want. So it's pretty easy to set up and to use to block unwanted login attempts. Over here, you've got a tab for logs, which is kind of important here, because if there are blocked IP addresses, you'll see that over here. They're not actually blocked, they're just IP addresses that show an effort to have an unauthorized entry to your site. And then you can either decide that you're going to safe list that IP address or block list it right over here. And then over here, you can safe list a username, or you can blacklist a username. Finally, you've got a tab over here for debugging, and right over here, you've got a dashboard, which I don't really use, but you can see there have been 2 attempts to have an unauthorized access to my site. This plugin works really well for sites that don't have custom login pages, like e-commerce sites or membership sites. Of course, there are other solutions to those kinds of sites to prevent brute force attacks. And this plugin might do the trick for those types of sites, but it would require custom configurations. Next, let's have a look at the WP Hide Login plugin. So you know that the default login screen for WordPress sites will always be the URL of the homepage /wp-admin. Here, let me show you right over here. I'm going to put in WP-admin. But I'm using the plugin, and I'm getting a 404 error page. So that's great. It's exactly what I want. So nobody can guess where the login screen is. So how do I do this? Here's my plugin, WP Hide Login. Let's have a look at the settings. It's very simple. Now the settings are on the General Settings page in your WP admin. See, General Settings. And at the bottom, this additional information was appended. And you can see right over here. So I can change now the login URL. So currently it just says login. I'm just going to put my name in, Bud. And I also can change the page that you're redirected to in the event you can't find it. So I'm just going to leave it at 404, which is where it is now. So now let's just save this and take a look. So I'm going to go back to my home page, and this time /BUD. And there you go. That's the login. So all you're doing with this plugin is changing the login URL, making it harder for bots and people to know where to log in. There's no question that when it comes to security, two-factor authentication is becoming a standard. Now, what exactly is two-factor authentication? Well, you know that you need to have a set of credentials to log into your WP admin, but with two-factor authentication, you get another factor that you need to complete in order to access your WP admin. Now, this is really important because it's another level of protection to prevent unauthorized users from getting access to your admin. One thing about two-factor authentication, while it makes your site more secure, it also makes it less convenient for you to access your WP admin. So I've already installed the plugin called Mini Orange Two-Factor Authentication. And the first screen I see after installation is this. Now, I already have an account, so I don't have to go through the process of setting up an account with Mini Orange. So I'm going to click on this over here, and I am going to just submit right over here. And what I'll see is just sort of some basic information on the fact that my site is connected to the Mini Orange service. If I want to disconnect it for any reason, I'd have to just go over here. So let's explore what we have here. Just going over here to two-factor. And what you can see here are a number of different two-factor authentication services that this plugin offers. Well, the only one I'm interested in is the Google Authenticator. So let's get started with configuring it. And you're going to need to download the Google Authenticator app on your cell phone in order for this to work, which I've already done. And let's just see over here. There's a QR code that I'm going to scan in a second. And if for any reason the scan doesn't work, I can follow these instructions over here. Hopefully it's going to work. And what I'll do is open up the application on my cell phone, and I will scan the QR code. And I'm looking at 6 digits that are going to disappear very quickly that I need to enter right in over here. I'll get a fresh set of digits right now. And this is how this works, so let me do this. And now I'm going to verify. Great. So I'm taken to the screen. It says it's successful. Let me test it. And I'm going to go back to my cell phone and see what digits I have now to enter. Now I'm going to show you what I'm looking at in a minute or two, but right now I see what I have to enter. So you can see now this is working. I can reconfigure, and that's the one I'm interested in and not these others. Now I'm going to also look, before I test this out, I'm going to just look at the settings over here. And I'm going to just keep the default settings as they are. Yes, it needs to be enabled, and I'll leave this as is. Well, here it says enable plugin log. I think I'm going to put that in there and just leave it just like this. Do I have to save anything? Yes, save the changes. All right, let's have a test. So what I'll do is come over here, enter my credentials as I normally would, begin the login process, and this is exactly what the plugin does. Puts up a pop-up over here where I have to enter the code. Of course, the code is something I'm going to find on my cell phone in the Google Authenticator. I'm going to enter it right now. I'm going to hit validate. And there you go. I'm logged into my site. This is perfect. This is exactly what I want. Now let me show you one setting change that might interest you, which is not the default. So over here in settings, I'm going to toggle this on over here, and you'll see what the difference is in 1 second. I'm going to do this. And let's go back, and let's log out over here. Now you can see that rather than get a pop-up modal like I had before, the two-factor authentication box is right over here. Okay, let's go back and look a little more closely at what this plugin has to offer. So over here, I'm going to take a look at the different types of login screens for which this plugin will apply. And you can see WooCommerce, and here's one, Restrict Content Pro, and on it goes. Elementor's in there. Now let me show you some of the different plans that are available with this plugin. And the reason why I'm showing you this is that this plugin is good as is for one user. But what happens if you have multiple users logging into your site? Well, you're going to need to buy one of these plans so that you can set this plugin up so that multiple users can log in using two-factor authentication. But this applies to whether it's a single site installation or even a multi-site installation. Well, we'll go back over here. And there's also some add-ons here if you're interested in. And that's really about it. Let me show you what I was looking at on my cell phone when I was using the Google two-factor authentication. And all this is a screenshot of my cell phone of the Google Authenticator application. This third entry here is for the mini orange two-factor authentication, and these are the numbers I entered when prompted into my site. When it comes to security, one of the things you want to keep close tabs on is the files in your WordPress install. And by that I mean whether files have been added to, changed, modified, deleted. A good plugin to do this is Website File Changes Monitor. And that's all it does, is monitor files on your site. Let's first look at the settings for the plugin. They're really straightforward. You can monitor whether the files have been added, deleted, modified. You can have an email sent to you if any of those things have happened on your site. Now here, the current file size that will be scanned is 5 megabytes, but that can be changed. And this tells you when an email should be sent. You can change that as well. Most of these settings are really straightforward. Here I have the scan to take place every hour. By default, it's on a daily basis, so I'm going to switch it back to the default. And the time in which the scan is to take place. And there's some other settings too. They're all really straightforward. One of them I like is that you can set the maximum file size that you wish to scan. Yeah. Now, If you don't want certain files to be scanned, I'll show you. Let me go down over here. You can add to the list that's already included. There'd be really no reason to scan some of these files over here, like a text file. And of course, if you want to add to the file type that's not to be scanned, you can do that. And some other settings as well. You can also exclude directories that you don't want to have scanned. And that's about it. I made one little change, so let's just save that. Okay, now let's test it out. So we're going to go over here, and I'm going to modify a file in my install. So I'm going to go right over here, and here's a file that I'm going to modify. Now, it's a pretty innocuous file. It's a readme.html file in the root of my installation. So all I'm going to do is just type in a paragraph and just type in text. Okay, and now I'm going to save this by just pressing Control S and to save it. So I've just modified the file. Now let's have a look. Now before I do, I just want to caution you, you should, when you install the plugin, do an initial scan so that the plugin will have a fingerprint to compare what's known and what was just changed. So in this case, I just made a modification. So let's click on modification. And let's take a look. And you can see here, it does report that the readme.html file was modified. And it tells you where it was located. Now right over here, you have some options over here. You want to mark as read. I'll explain that in a second. You want to exclude from a future scan, or you want to exclude directory from scans. Okay, I'm just going to mark it as read. Now, what does that mean? Well, there's a couple ways to do it. What it means is that for a future scan, it will not pick this up as a modified file. And I do want to do that. Now, if there were a change to a file, you'd see that right here. And if further investigation is necessary, well, then you could look into that file. This plugin is great to pick up the detection of any malware or if there's been a file inclusion exploit. The WP Activity Log plugin is a great way to keep track of what is going on behind the scenes of your website. So if I just scroll down this page over here, each one of these entries represents some kind of an event that took place on my site in the order in which it took place, with the most recent being on the top. Now, just going back to the top over here, if I go to this second entry right over here, I created another user, and that's considered a critical event. And after I created the user, an email was submitted to that user to change their password. That should sound familiar. And if I go down over here, just different events that took place. These symbols over here represent a severity status. And if I look over here on the right-hand side, it'll give me a better description of exactly what was taking place. And I see that in all cases, I've been the user. In this case, WordPress itself did something to the site, and that's fine. What about the settings for this plugin? Over here in the General tab, infinite scroll when you use the activity log viewer, so I had that set that way. And some of these others, dashboard widget, we're going to just scroll through this pretty quick. I think the one I kind of like down here is to hide the plugin so that no one can see that you're using this plugin. By default, and for good reason, it's set to no, but I would think about changing this to yes. Now, as far as the activity log viewer goes, here you can change how long you want to keep the data for, when you want the data to be purged, and some other settings as well. Here you can decide what you want to show on the activity log viewer page. And well, that's good enough for me. And then I'm going to go over here now, file changes. Now this plugin integrates very well with the plugin I just demonstrated, so no need going over that again. If you want to exclude certain roles from being monitored and tracked, you can do that right over here. So for example, if you wanted to exclude certain users, certain roles, certain IP addresses, you get the idea. That's a really nice feature. And over here, if I want to reset or delete the plugin, you've got some settings right over here to work with. Now, one other thing, if I go over to here, I can enable or disable events from being logged because I might not want to capture all the login detail that's possible, and it will make it a lot easier to look at the log viewer itself. This plugin can integrate with third-party plugins, so you can monitor the activity that is generated from Gravity Forms and TablePress and a bunch of others. If you're wondering about any suspicious activity that might be going on in your site, use the WP Activity Log plugin. Now let's have a look at 2 ways in which you can block IP addresses from accessing your site. First, we'll do it with a plugin called IP Location Block. And second, you can just edit your htaccess file. And for this method, you'll find the code for the htaccess file on this page, so there's no need for me to demonstrate that now. But as far as the plugin goes, well, let's have a look. So right over here in the settings of this plugin, well, let's scroll down. I'm just going to show you some of the defaults. In fact, all of this is default. I'm going to set it up as whitelisting for the United States. In other words, only IP addresses from the United States can access the site now. And I'm going to skip down here. Yes, I do see where I can whitelist particular IP addresses. I'm just going to leave that blank. And I'm going to scroll down a bit, and these are all of the defaults. The only one that's not a default is if I go to the front end behaviors. By default, this is unchecked, and I check this because I don't want you to even see the front-facing part of my site when I'm blocking an IP address. So I'm going to do that and leave everything as is. And since we're whitelisting just the United States websites, there's nothing to show you as I am in the US. But now if I change this to blacklist, and I'm going to blacklist all IPs from the United States, and let's save this down here. There's a lot of settings here. Some of them deal with privacy, which has implications for security. And I'm going to save, and now let's have a look. I'm just going to refresh this. And there you see, this is what the user is going to see if they come from the United States. Now, can you edit this message? Yes, you can. This is just what this plugin is throwing off. Let's have a look at another example. So this time what I'm going to do is I am going to whitelist only IP addresses from Canada. Now, if you're not sure what the codes are, they give you a handy little link over here. This plugin is loaded with resources. And I'm going to just look over here and see what is Canada. Now, I happen to know Canada is CA. So there we are. Okay. And I'm going to go back in here, and I'm just going to remove that and put in CA over here. And I'm going to whitelist Canada. Okay. Let's go over here. Now, you're not going to see any change because Canada is whitelisted, meaning only IP addresses from Canada can now access this site. Well, I'm in the United States, so I cannot access this. That makes sense. But now let's reverse this and blacklist Canada. I'm just going to switch this over to blacklist. Make sure it says CA over here. And scroll down again. Now let's have a look. And that's fine. So currently, IP addresses emanating from Canada will not be able to access the site. Remember, I am in the United States, so I can see it. One other demonstration to do. Let's whitelist the United States again. So we'll put that in there. But we'll blacklist my IP address. So just to give you a sense of the versatility and power of this plugin, and for my IP address is right over here. How convenient. I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to paste this where it says blacklist. Of course, if I wanted to do multiple IP addresses, I would comma separate them. And I am now going to go back to the bottom and save. I should point out that be careful of this warning message over here. You could easily get locked out of your site. So in this case, I would be locked out. Let's look again, and that's what I would expect. Okay. Now back in the settings, we'll take you through a little more detail here. I'm just going to scroll down over here, and you could actually do a simulated mode over here, which is a smart thing to do because you don't want to get locked out of your site. You can see that this plugin's got a lot of options, and it will do what you need it to when it comes to blocking IP addresses and countries. So in summing up, website security is a shared responsibility between site owners, developers, clients, agencies, just about everyone, but perhaps the end user. And while multi-purpose security plugins are fine, there just might be instances where you need a single-purpose security plugin, such as one of the 6 that I've just demonstrated here, which will help to harden any website.